Welcome, dear listener, to a tale woven in starlight and dragonfire. As you settle into comfort, let the weight of the day fall away like autumn leaves from ancient trees. Tonight we journey into the heart of the wizarding world, to a place where magic hums in the very air, where a crooked house stands against the sky, and where a boy was born who would one day speak the language of dragons. Let your breathing slow, your mind grow quiet, and allow yourself to drift into the story of Charlie Weasley, a keeper of dragons, a guardian of ancient creatures, a soul who found his destiny written in scales and flame. Close your eyes now, dear listener, and let us begin. The burrow stood, crooked and wonderful against the Devon sky, held together by magic and love in equal measure. It was a house that shouldn't have stood at all, really. Floors added upon floors, rooms jutting out at impossible angles, chimneys sprouting like mushrooms after rain. But stand it did, warm and welcoming, smoke curling from its many chimneys into the soft twilight of a December evening in 1972. Inside, Molly Weasley paced the kitchen, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other stirring a pot of soup with her wand. The wooden spoon moved in lazy, soothing circles, and the scent of vegetables and herbs filled the air with comfort. Upstairs, little Bill, not yet 2 years old, slept soundly in his cot, thumb tucked in his mouth, dreaming whatever dreams small wizards dream. Arthur Weasley sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read the Daily Prophet, but truly watching his wife with gentle concern and wonder. This was their second child, soon to arrive, and though Molly had done this before, Arthur marvelled at the miracle of it all, the creation of new life, the expansion of love that seemed impossible until it happened. Any moment now, Molly said softly, pausing to breathe through a contraction. Arthur, dear, would you send word to your mother? Arthur stood immediately, sending his Patronus, a weasel, appropriately enough, streaming through the wall with a message. Within minutes, the fireplace roared green, and Cedrella Weasley stepped through, brushing soot from her robes with the practiced ease of a woman who had raised 3 sons of her own. Molly, darling, she said warmly, embracing her daughter-in-law, let's get you comfortable. The night deepened. Stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. In the garden, gnomes settled into their holes, and the old ghoul in the attic quieted his banging, as if the house itself knew to be gentle. And in the early hours of the morning, as the first light touched the frost-covered fields, Charles Weasley came into the world. He didn't cry immediately. Instead, he opened his eyes, bright and curious and startlingly alert, and looked around the room as if taking inventory of this strange new place. When he did cry, it was lusty and strong, the cry of a child ready to embrace life with both hands. Charles, Molly whispered, exhausted and radiant, holding him close. Charlie. He's perfect, Arthur breathed, touching one tiny fist with wonder. And he was. Red-haired, like all Weasleys, with a dusting of freckles that would darken with sun and time, and those eyes, observant, intelligent, filled with a light that spoke of adventures yet to come. Little did anyone know, as they cooed over the newest Weasley, that this child would grow to command the respect of dragons, would stand in mountain storms, speaking ancient words to ancient creatures, would one day face a choice that would test the very depths of his courage and compassion. But that night, he was simply Charlie, warm and new and perfect, wrapped in blankets, knitted by his grandmother's patient hands, held in his mother's loving arms, protected by magic and family and the crooked walls of the burrow. Charlie grew like a weed in summer, strong and freckled and endlessly curious. The burrow, already chaotic with Bill toddling about and knocking things over, became even more wonderfully mad with two small boys racing through its tilted corridors. But even as a baby, Charlie was different from his brother. Bill loved people. He would charm anyone who visited, reaching for them with chubby hands, bestowing smiles like gifts. Charlie, though friendly enough, seemed more fascinated by the garden gnomes than by guests, more interested in the family owl than in the neighbours who stopped by for tea. "He's got away with creatures," Molly observed one afternoon when Charlie was barely 2. She stood at the kitchen window, watching her son sit perfectly still in the garden, while a wild rabbit nibbled grass not 3 feet from him. "Look at that, Arthur. That rabbit knows he won't hurt it." Arthur joined her at the window, slipping an arm around her waist. "He's special, our Charlie." Indeed he was. The garden gnomes, normally vicious little things that bit fingers and kicked shins, seemed oddly docile around Charlie. He would sit among them, talking in his toddler babble, and they would listen, their potato-like heads tilted as if they understood. The chickens in the yard followed him like he was their mother hen. Even the old tabby cat from down the lane, who hissed at everyone, would curl up in Charlie's lap and purr like distant thunder. "More," little Charlie would demand, pointing at the creatures, wanting to see them, touch them, understand them. "More kitty, more bird." His first signs of magic came, as they often did, from strong emotion. But Charlie's magic seemed always tied to the creatures around him. When Bill, in a fit of toddler temper, tried to pull the tail of Errol, the family owl, Charlie, barely 3, had shouted, "No!" And suddenly Bill found himself gently but firmly held in place by invisible hands until he calmed down. Molly had gasped, then laughed. "Well, I suppose we know Charlie will protect his friends." Another time, when a garden gnome had gotten itself stuck in the fence, crying its strange guttural cry of distress, 4-year-old Charlie had run to it, placed his small hands on either side of its lumpy head, and somehow, though wandless, wordless, and far too young to understand what he was doing, had made the fence posts shift just enough for the gnome to wriggle free. "Thank you," Arthur had sworn the gnome said before scuttling away. "Don't be ridiculous," Molly had replied. "Gnomes can't talk." But Charlie had smiled, satisfied, as if he and the gnome understood each other perfectly. The burrow, in those early years, was a place of endless wonder for young Charlie. Every corner held magic, literally. Staircases that shifted when you weren't looking. Doors that only opened if you asked politely. A clock that told you where family members were, rather than what time it was. Dishes that washed themselves in the sink with cheerful efficiency. But more than the household magic, Charlie loved the wild magic, the untamed kind that couldn't be contained in a house, no matter how crooked and wonderful. He loved the way the wind whispered through the orchard, carrying scents of apple and mystery. He loved the way morning dew caught on spiderwebs like diamonds. He loved the way the moon made the fields silver, and how owls called to each other in the darkness. His brothers came one by one. Percy arrived when Charlie was 3, a serious baby who seemed to be born frowning thoughtfully. Then Fred and George, the twins, who would grow to be chaos incarnate, but who, as babies, simply doubled the noise and laughter in the house. Ron came later, and finally Ginny, the only sister, the only daughter Molly had longed for. Charlie loved them all, in his way. He was patient with Percy's questions, gentle with the twins' madness, protective of Ron and Ginny when they came along. But he was never quite as interested in people as he was in creatures. While Bill would organize elaborate games with his siblings, Charlie would slip away to the garden, to the fields, to anywhere he might encounter something with wings or scales or fur. "Where's Charlie?" became a common question in the Weasley household. Probably talking to something that can't talk back, Bill would say, not unkindly. But, oh, how Charlie felt they could talk back. In the way a barn owl blinked slowly, in the way a garden snake curved its body, in the way a beetle clicked its wings, there was communication there, if only you knew how to listen. And Charlie somehow knew. The first time he saw a picture of a dragon, Charlie was 6 years old. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky pressed low and grey over the burrow, and all the children were trapped inside, driving Molly to distraction. Bill and Percy were arguing about the proper way to play wizard's chess. Percy insisted on reading the rulebook aloud. Bill just wanted to play. The twins were too young to do much but crawl around and pull things off shelves. Charlie, seeking escape from the chaos, had climbed the stairs to the small, cluttered sitting room where Arthur kept his books. Most were about Muggle artifacts, rubber ducks, plugs, batteries, telephones, things that fascinated Arthur endlessly. But there, on a lower shelf, was a book Charlie had never noticed before, Dragons of the World, A Complete History, by Newt Scamander. Charlie pulled it from the shelf carefully, reverently. The cover showed a Hungarian horntail in flight, wings spread wide, fire streaming from its jaws against a stormy sky. Even in the still image, even on paper, Charlie could feel the power, the majesty, the terrible beauty of the creature. He opened the book with trembling hands. There, on the pages, he found them. Chinese fireballs with scarlet scales and mushroom-shaped spikes, Welsh greens that nested in the mountains, Swedish short snouts with silvery blue scales that shimmered like ice, Ukrainian iron bellies, the largest of all, Norwegian ridgebacks with black scales and vicious temperaments, and Romanian longhorns with dark green scales and long glittering horns. But it was the Romanian ridgeback that captured Charlie's heart. The description spoke of mountains, of fierce independence, of creatures that bonded rarely but deeply with those they trusted. The illustration showed one perched on a mountain peak, wings folded, eyes intelligent and ancient, looking out over a landscape of snow and stone. Charlie traced the image with one small finger. "Hello," he whispered. Something in his chest expanded, like a door opening onto a vast horizon he hadn't known existed. This was it. This was what he'd been waiting for, without knowing he was waiting. This sense of rightness, of destiny, of home. Not the burrow, beloved as it was, but somewhere else, somewhere high and wild, somewhere dragons flew. "Charlie, dinner!" Molly's voice floated up the stairs. But Charlie couldn't move. He sat frozen, the book in his lap, staring at the Romanian ridgeback, feeling something shift in the foundation of his young soul. Some people knew their calling early. Some people were born knowing. Charlie Weasley, at 6 years old, wet from the rain, freckled and red-haired and ordinary in every way, Charlie knew. He would work with dragons. He would protect them, understand them, speak their language if such a thing were possible. He would go to the mountains and the wild places, and he would dedicate his life to these magnificent creatures. "Charlie Weasley, if you don't come down this instant—" "Coming, Mum." He closed the book carefully, held it against his chest for a moment, like a promise, then placed it back on the shelf. But he knew he would return to it. Again and again he would return, memorizing every word, every description, every beautiful, terrible detail. At the dinner table, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of his family, Bill chattering about starting Hogwarts soon, Percy listing the supplies he thought one should take to school, the twins banging spoons on their high chairs, Arthur asking Molly about her day. Charlie was quiet. "You all right, love?" Molly asked, serving him a generous portion of shepherd's pie. "I saw a dragon today," Charlie said softly. "In a book, I expect," Arthur said with a smile. "Yeah?" Charlie looked up, his eyes bright with dreams and determination. "When I grow up, I'm going to work with them, real ones." Bill laughed. "Dragons are dangerous, Charlie." "I know," Charlie said simply, "but I'm going to do it anyway." Molly and Arthur exchanged glances over the table, the look parents share when they realize their child has just revealed a fundamental truth about who they are, who they will become. Some dreams are passing fancies, some dreams are destiny speaking in a child's voice. "Well then," Arthur said gently, "I suppose you'd better study hard." "I will," Charlie promised, and he did. From that day forward, every book about magical creatures that came into the house found its way to Charlie. Every scrap of information about dragons, every mention in the Daily Prophet of dragon attacks or dragon reserves or dragon regulations. Charlie absorbed it all, like soil absorbing rain. He still loved his family. He still played with his brothers, helped his mother in the garden, listened to his father's stories about muggles and their fascinating contraptions. But underneath it all, running like an underground river through stone, was the knowledge of what he would become. A dragon keeper, a guardian of ancient fire, a boy who would grow into a man who spoke to creatures of legend. The years passed gently at the burrow, as years do when you are young and loved and surrounded by magic. Charlie grew taller, stronger, more freckled with each summer sun. He climbed trees to observe birds' nests, waded in the pond to watch tadpoles become frogs, sat motionless in meadows to see deer emerge from the forest edge at dusk. And always, in the back of his mind, he carried the image of that Romanian ridgeback, proud and fierce on its mountain, wings folded, eyes ancient and knowing. Waiting, Charlie sometimes thought, waiting for him. One day, he would whisper to the stars before falling asleep, his room filled with the soft breathing of his brothers. "One day I'll find you." And perhaps, in some distant mountain range, under those same stars, a dragon stirred in its sleep, sensing across time and distance the boy who would one day understand its language, who would bridge the gap between human and dragon, who would face impossible choices in its name. But for now, Charlie was simply a child, loved and safe in the burrow, dreaming of wings and fire, of mountains and mysteries, of a destiny that called to him in the cry of owls and the rustle of wind through orchard trees. The morning of September 1st, 1984, dawned bright and golden over the burrow. Charlie woke before anyone else, too excited to sleep, and lay in bed watching dust motes dance in the early light streaming through his window. Today he would finally go to Hogwarts. Bill had been regaling him with stories for the past year, Tales of moving staircases and talking portraits, of Quidditch matches and midnight feasts, of the Great Lake and the Forbidden Forest, and all the magnificent, terrible, wonderful secrets the castle held. But what Charlie most wanted to know about, Bill couldn't tell him much. What about the creatures? Charlie had asked a dozen times. What magical creatures are there? There's the giant squid in the lake, Bill had offered. And owls, obviously. I think there are some thestrals in the forest, but you can't see them unless you've seen death. Oh, and Hagrid, he's the groundskeeper. He's mad about creatures. You'd like him. Charlie had committed every word to memory. A groundskeeper who loved creatures. That was something, at least. Now, as the house began to wake around him, Percy's careful footsteps in the hall, his mother's voice. Calling up the stairs, the twins already squabbling about something. Charlie dressed quickly in his new school robes. They were second-hand, of course, passed down from Bill, but Molly had mended them carefully, and they fit well enough. The Hogwarts crest on the breast pocket seemed to glow with promise. "Charlie, breakfast!" Molly's voice carried the edge it always got on important days, loving, but brooking no delay. The kitchen was chaos, as always. Bill was checking his trunk for the third time, making sure he had everything for his second year. Percy, who wouldn't attend Hogwarts for another 2 years, was reading aloud from Hogwarts, a history. As if Charlie might need last-minute studying, the twins were trying to steal bacon from each other's plates. Baby Ron sat in his high chair, watching everything with wide eyes. "Eat, Charlie," Molly said, placing a full plate before him. "You'll need your strength. And don't look so nervous, dear. You'll love it there." But Charlie wasn't nervous. He was burning with anticipation, with readiness, with the certainty that everything he'd been waiting for was about to begin. King's Cross Station was wonderfully mad, muggles rushing about with their ordinary luggage, completely unaware that wizards and witches were walking right past them toward platform 9 3/4. Arthur, who found muggles endlessly fascinating, kept getting distracted by signs and ticket machines and people in business suits. "Arthur, we'll miss the train," Molly said firmly, steering him toward the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Charlie watched Bill run at the brick wall and vanish. His heart leapt. Magic. Real, everyday magic that would soon be as natural as breathing. "Your turn, love," Molly said gently. Charlie gripped his trolley, trunk laden with second-hand books, his own wand, elm and dragon heartstring, 11 inches, slightly springy, and a small cage containing a barn owl he'd named Sky, and ran. The barrier felt like cool water, a moment of pressure, and then platform 9 3/4 stretched before him, the Hogwarts Express gleaming scarlet in the morning sun, steam billowing from its chimney, students and families milling everywhere in a beautiful chaos of robes and trunks and owls and cats and excited chatter. "It's brilliant," Charlie breathed. Bill appeared at his shoulder, grinning. "Told you. Come on, let's get a compartment before they're all taken. Mum, we'll be fine. Stop fussing." "I'll stop fussing when you're both safely on the train," Molly said, tears already gathering in her eyes. She pulled Charlie into a fierce hug. "Be good, study hard, write to us, and Charlie," she pulled back, looking into his eyes, "be yourself. That's all you need to be." Arthur hugged him next, less tearful, but just as warm. "Learn everything you can, son, and have an adventure or two for me." "I will, Dad." Percy shook his hand solemnly, as if Charlie were going off to war, rather than school. The twins grabbed his legs in a joint hug that nearly toppled him over. Even baby Ron seemed to wave, though he probably just wanted the bacon Charlie had been holding. Then Bill was pulling him onto the train, helping him hoist his trunk into a compartment, and suddenly they were moving, the platform sliding away, Molly waving her handkerchief, Arthur beaming, Percy still looking solemn, and Charlie's life at Hogwarts beginning. The Scottish Highlands unfolded outside the window like a dream-made landscape, rolling hills turning to rugged mountains, lochs gleaming like mirrors, forests dark and deep and full of mystery. Charlie pressed his face to the glass, watching it all, memorizing it, wondering what creatures lived in those forests, what swam in those lochs. "First time's always the most magical," Bill said quietly, understanding. "But it never quite stops being magical, even when you've done it a few times." Other students came and went from their compartment. Bill's friends poked their heads in, greeting him enthusiastically. A girl with long brown hair asked if they had room. They did, and introduced herself as Penelope, a first year like Charlie, already nervous about the sorting. "What if the hat can't decide?" she worried. "What if I'm not clever enough for Ravenclaw, but not brave enough for Gryffindor?" "Then you'll be wherever you're meant to be," Charlie said simply. "The hat knows, doesn't it?" Bill nodded approvingly. "Spoken like a true Gryffindor." "You think I'll be in Gryffindor?" Charlie asked. "Weasleys usually are," Bill said. "But even if you're not, you'll be brilliant wherever you land." The train rattled on, carrying them northward, carrying Charlie toward his destiny. He felt it humming in his bones, the rightness of this journey, the sense that every mile brought him closer to where he was meant to be. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, a voice echoed through the train. "We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage on the train. It will be taken to the school separately." Charlie's heart began to race. 5 minutes. 5 minutes until he saw the castle Bill had described in such loving detail. 5 minutes until the next chapter truly began. The train slowed, stopped. Students poured onto a dark platform, and then Charlie heard it. A voice like rumbling thunder, warm and welcoming. First years over here. Come on now, don't be shy." A man. No, a giant of a man, easily twice as tall as anyone else, with wild black hair and a beard that seemed to contain bits of forest, stood holding a lantern aloft. This had to be Hagrid, the groundskeeper Bill had mentioned. "Hello there," Hagrid said as Charlie and the other first years clustered around him. "Welcome to Hogwarts. Now, follow me. 4 to a boat. Mind your step." They walked down a steep path, and then Charlie saw it. A dark lake, smooth as glass, reflecting stars that had just begun to appear. And there, across the water, rising from the far shore like something from a fairy tale, turrets and towers and windows blazing with light. Hogwarts. "No more'n 4 to a boat," Hagrid called. Charlie climbed into a small boat with Penelope and 2 boys who introduced themselves as Marcus and Terence. The boats moved by themselves, gliding across the black water without oars or engines. Just magic, pure and simple and beautiful. The castle grew larger, grander, more impossible with every moment. Charlie could feel the age of it, the power thrumming in its very stones. How many students had made this journey? How many had sat in these boats, hearts pounding, eyes wide, futures uncertain? They glided through a curtain of ivy and into an underground harbour, then climbed stone steps to stand before massive oak doors. Hagrid knocked 3 times, and the doors swung open. A tall witch in emerald robes stood there, her expression stern but not unkind, her eyes sharp behind square spectacles. "The Furs years, Professor McGonagall," Hagrid said. "Thank you, Hagrid. I'll take them from here." Professor McGonagall looked over the group of nervous first years, and Charlie could have sworn her gaze lingered on him for just a moment. Recognition, perhaps, of another Weasley about to be sorted. She led them through an entrance hall so grand Charlie had to tilt his head back to see the ceiling, then into a small chamber off to the side. The sounds of hundreds of students talking and laughing echoed from beyond another set of doors. "Welcome to Hogwarts," Professor McGonagall said. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony." Charlie barely heard the rest. His heart was beating so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, Slytherin. 4 houses, 4 possible homes. Which would be his? Then they were moving again, walking through the entrance hall, and the doors to the Great Hall opened. Nothing Bill had said could have prepared him for this. The hall stretched impossibly long, 4 house tables filled with students in black robes trimmed with house colours, all turning to look at the first years. Candles floated in mid-air by the thousands, and above them, Charlie gasped. The ceiling showed the night sky, stars wheeling in their ancient dance, exactly as they appeared outside. "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside," Penelope whispered. "I read about it in—" But Charlie wasn't listening. He was drinking it all in, the grandeur, the magic, the sense of history and power and possibility. Professor McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years, and on it a patched, frayed, pointed wizard's hat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. The song spoke of the 4 founders, of qualities each valued, of unity and choice and destiny. Charlie listened, barely breathing, until finally the song ended, and Professor McGonagall unrolled a long piece of parchment. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," she said. "Abbott, Hannah." One by one, names were called. The hat deliberated, sometimes instantly, sometimes taking long moments, and announced its decisions. Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Gryffindor. Each student ran to their table amidst cheers and applause. Clearwater, Penelope. The nervous girl from the train sat on the stool, the hat barely touching her head, before calling out, "Ravenclaw!" She looked relieved as she hurried to her table. More names, more sortings. Charlie's palms grew sweaty. "Weasley, Charles." The hall seemed to hush for a moment, or perhaps that was just Charlie's imagination. He walked to the stool on legs that felt disconnected from his body, sat down, and Professor McGonagall lowered the hat onto his head. It fell over his eyes, blocking out the Great Hall, blocking out everything except a small voice that spoke directly into his mind. "Ah, another Weasley. I remember your brother, brave, loyal, clever in his way. And you? Very interesting. You have your family's courage, certainly. But there's something else here, a deep affinity for the wild things, the untamed. You could do well in Hufflepuff. Your dedication is extraordinary. But no, I see where you need to be. The courage to face dragons, the loyalty to protect them, the determination to walk your own path. Gryffindor." The word rang out across the hall, and the Gryffindor table erupted in cheers. Charlie pulled off the hat, grinning despite himself, and ran to the table, where Bill stood, applauding with the rest, a space saved beside him. "Knew it," Bill said, clapping him on the back as Charlie sat down. "Welcome home, little brother." Home. Yes, Charlie thought, looking around at the house that would be his for the next 7 years. Gryffindor. The house of the brave. The house of those who faced their fears and walked toward danger rather than away from it. Perfect. The rest of the sorting passed in a blur of names and cheers. When the last student had been sorted, Professor Dumbledore, ancient and magnificent, with a beard that nearly touched his belt and eyes that twinkled with secrets and kindness, stood to speak. "Welcome," he said, arms spread wide. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are: nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak, thank you." He sat back down, and before Charlie could wonder if the headmaster was quite sane, the plates before him filled with food. Mountains of roast chicken, platters of chips, bowls of vegetables, boats of gravy. More food than Charlie had ever seen, appearing by magic, delicious and perfect. "Tuck in," Bill advised, loading his own plate. "You'll need your strength. Tomorrow, the real work begins." Charlie ate, surrounded by the chatter and laughter of his new housemates, and felt something settle in his chest. This was right. This was where he was meant to be. And from here, from this castle of magic and mystery, he would learn everything he needed to know to achieve his dream. "Dragons," he thought, biting into a piece of perfectly roasted chicken. "I'm coming for you. Just wait." After the feast, when Charlie was so full he could barely move, the first years were led to Gryffindor Tower by a prefect. They climbed staircases that moved, past portraits that whispered and pointed, walked through corridors that seemed to shift when they weren't looking. "The password changes every fortnight," the prefect explained when they reached a portrait of a fat lady in a pink dress. "This week it's Caput Draconis." Dragon's head, Charlie thought with a little thrill. Even the password was perfect. The fat lady swung forward, revealing a round hole in the wall. They climbed through into the Gryffindor common room, all warm reds and golds, comfortable armchairs, a crackling fire, windows looking out over the dark grounds. It felt immediately like home. The boys' dormitories were up a spiral staircase, and Charlie found his trunk already waiting beside a 4-poster bed hung with deep red curtains. 4 other beds held the boys who would be his roommates for the next 7 years. He changed into his pajamas, exhausted from the long day, from the excitement and emotion and sheer overwhelming magic of it all. As he slid between sheets softer than any he'd known, he heard one of his roommates, Marcus, the boy from the boat, whisper into the darkness, "Did that really happen? Are we really at Hogwarts?" "Yeah," Charlie whispered back, grinning into his pillow. "We really are." He fell asleep to the sound of his roommate's breathing, to the distant hoot of owls, to the whisper of wind against ancient stone. And he dreamed of dragons, great winged beasts soaring over mountains, breathing fire into starlit skies, waiting for a red-haired boy who spoke their language, who understood their hearts, who would one day protect them with everything he had. Tomorrow, his Hogwarts education would begin. Tomorrow, he would start learning the magic he would need. Tomorrow, he would take the first real steps on the path toward his destiny. But tonight, dear listener, Let us leave him here, safe and warm and dreaming, surrounded by magic and possibility, 11 years old and standing at the threshold of everything he would become. The port key, an old leather boot, cracked and worn, deposited Charlie Weasley unceremoniously onto Romanian soil in the spring of 1991. He stumbled, caught his balance, and looked up. The Carpathian Mountains rose before him like the spine of the world, jagged peaks still crowned with snow, despite the season, forests of dark pine climbing their slopes, valleys shrouded in morning mist that glowed silver in the early light. The air was crisp and thin, carrying scents of wildflowers and pine resin and something else, something ancient and powerful that made the hair on Charlie's arms stand up. Magic. Wild magic, untamed by wands or spells, the kind that had existed long before wizards learned to channel it, the kind that would exist long after. This was a place where the old ways still held sway, where nature and magic intertwined so completely you couldn't separate one from the other. Charlie shouldered his pack, his heart racing with anticipation and joy, and a rightness so profound it made his chest ache. 7 years at Hogwarts had passed, 7 years of learning and growing, of Quidditch glory and quiet hours in the library, of friendships forged and lessons mastered. He'd turned down a professional Quidditch career, had broken his mother's heart a little when he told her he was leaving England for Romania, for dragons, for the life. He'd always known he would live. But standing here now, breathing this mountain air, feeling this wild magic, he knew he'd made the right choice. You must be the new one. Weasley, yes? Charlie turned to find a witch standing behind him, appearing as if from nowhere. She was perhaps in her 40s, weathered and strong, with short cropped dark hair touched with grey and eyes the colour of storm clouds. She wore practical dragon-hide clothing, scarred and patched, but well maintained, and carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who'd faced danger and survived it countless times. Yes, ma'am, Charlie Weasley. He extended his hand. She shook it firmly, her grip calloused and strong. Anna Voltour, senior handler, welcome to the Romanian Dragon Sanctuary. How was your journey? Quick, Charlie said with a grin, and slightly nauseating. Portkeys always make me a bit queasy. You'll get used to it. Come, I'll show you to the compound and introduce you to the others. Can you walk and talk? Or do you need a moment to adjust to the altitude? I can walk, Charlie assured her, though truthfully the thin air was making him slightly lightheaded. But he'd never admit weakness, not on his first day, not when he was finally here. They set off along a narrow path that wound through the pine forest, climbing steadily upward. Anna moved with the sure-footed grace of someone who'd walked these mountains for years, barely seeming to notice the steep incline that had Charlie's legs burning within minutes. The sanctuary covers approximately 50 square kilometers, Anna explained as they walked. We maintain natural habitats for several dragon species, primarily Romanian longhorns and ridgebacks, but we also have a few Swedish short snouts, a common Welsh green, and one very elderly Ukrainian ironbelly. Dragons are kept in their respective territories. We don't force interaction between species. They have their ranges, their nesting sites, their hunting grounds. Our job is to monitor them, protect them from poachers, provide medical care when needed, and ensure they're healthy and thriving. Charlie listened intently, committing every word to memory. How many handlers work here? 8 full-time, including yourself now, plus support staff, healers, researchers, maintenance workers. It's a small operation, but effective. We're funded by the Romanian Ministry of Magic, with some international contributions from the International Confederation of Wizards. You'll meet everyone at dinner tonight. The forest began to thin, and suddenly they emerged onto a ridge, and Charlie's breath caught in his throat. The valley spread below them, vast and beautiful, ringed by mountains that seemed to touch the sky. A river snaked through the valley floor, glinting like molten silver in the morning sun. And there, built into the mountainside itself, was the compound. A cluster of stone buildings that looked as if they'd grown from the rock, blending so seamlessly with the landscape you could almost miss them. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and Charlie could see figures moving between buildings, going about their morning routines. But more than the compound, more than the breathtaking vista, Charlie saw dragons. 3 of them, soaring high above the far end of the valley, their wings catching the light, their scales gleaming. Even at this distance, even just as silhouettes against the sky, they were magnificent. Romanian longhorns, Anna said quietly, watching Charlie's face. A mating trio. They've been courting for the past week. Beautiful, aren't they? Yes, Charlie breathed. Beautiful didn't begin to cover it. Majestic, terrifying, perfect, and still the words fell short. All his life he dreamed of this moment, all those hours poring over books, studying dragon anatomy and behavior, learning everything Hogwarts could teach him about magical creatures. All those Quidditch matches where he'd flown as high as he dared, pretending he had wings made of scales rather than wood and straw. All those letters home where he tried to explain to his family why he had to do this, why nothing else would ever be enough. And now, here he was, Charlie Weasley, dragon handler, finally home. Come on, Anna said with a small smile, understanding in her eyes. Let's get you settled. You'll have plenty of time to stare at dragons. It's literally your job now. The compound was even more impressive up close. The main building housed communal spaces, dining hall, sitting room, library, medical bay. Smaller structures served as dormitories, storage for equipment and dragonhide protective gear, a research laboratory, and what Anna called the hatchery, though she explained they rarely had eggs these days. Charlie's quarters were simple, but comfortable. A small room with a narrow bed, a desk, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the valley. His trunk sat waiting at the foot of the bed, delivered by some magic. He didn't question. Unpack, settle in, Anna said from the doorway. Dinner's at 6. Someone will come fetch you. Rest if you can. Tomorrow your real training begins, and I promise you you'll need all your strength. When she left, Charlie sat on the bed and looked around his new home. It was spare, Spartan even, nothing like the cluttered warmth of the burrow or the grandeur of Gryffindor Tower. But it was his space, in this place of dragons and mountains and wild magic. He unpacked slowly, putting away clothes and books, arranging his few possessions. A photo of his family, all of them crammed together outside the burrow, waving at the camera, went on the desk. His wand, faithful elm and dragon heartstring, went on the bedside table. The dragon scale necklace Bill had given him as a graduation present, he clasped around his neck. Then he lay back on the bed, hands behind his head, and listened. The sounds were different here. No traffic. No voices of hundreds of students, no castle settling its ancient stones. Instead, wind through pines, the distant rush of the river, the call of mountain birds, and underneath it all, so faint he might have imagined it, a sound like distant thunder that might have been dragons calling to each other across the peaks. Charlie closed his eyes and smiled. He was exactly where he was meant to be. Dinner that evening was a rowdy affair. 8 handlers plus support staff crowded around a long wooden table in the dining hall. Plates piled with hearty stew and fresh bread, mugs of ale or tea depending on preference. The conversation was loud and multilingual. Romanian, English, Swedish, and what might have been Welsh, all mixing together in a cheerful cacophony. Anna introduced Charlie to the team. There was Stefan, a burly Romanian wizard with a magnificent moustache who'd worked with dragons for 30 years and had the scars to prove it. Ingrid, a Swedish witch with ice-blonde hair and a dry sense of humour who specialised in healing injured dragons. Marcus and Diana, a married couple from Wales who handled the Welsh Green and assisted with the others. Alexei, a young Russian wizard not much older than Charlie, with quick hands and quicker wit. And twins, actual identical twins, named Mihai and Andrei, Romanian through and through, who finished each other's sentences and had an uncanny ability to predict dragon behaviour. "Welcome, welcome," Stefan boomed, clapping Charlie on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. Another Brit. Good, good. Marcus was getting lonely. "I was not," Marcus protested mildly, his Welsh accent thick and comfortable. "But it's nice to have another English speaker around. These lot," he gestured at the Romanians, "talk so fast I only catch every third word." "That's because you never bothered to learn Romanian properly," Diana said, elbowing her husband affectionately. "I know the important words. Hello, goodbye, don't eat me, please." Laughter rippled around the table. Charlie felt himself relaxing into the warmth of it, the easy camaraderie of people who worked together in dangerous conditions and relied on each other absolutely. "So, Charlie Weasley," Ingrid said, studying him with sharp blue eyes. "Anna says you turned down professional Quidditch to be here. That true?" "Yes, Mom." "Call me Ingrid. Why?" Charlie met her gaze steadily. "Because I've wanted to work with dragons since I was 6 years old. Quidditch is flying on a broom. This is flying with dragons. No contest." Stefan laughed, a sound like rolling thunder. "I like him. Direct answer, no nonsense. You'll do well here, boy, if you survive your first month." "First month is the worst," Mihai, or was it Andrei, said cheerfully. "Everything hurts," the other twin continued. "Your muscles scream. Your brain feels like mush from all the learning, and you're terrified every single day. But then," they said in unison, grinning, "you realize you're actually doing it, and everything changes." "Tell us about your training," Anna said, more gently. "What did Hogwarts teach you about dragons?" Charlie launched into a summary of his Care of Magical Creatures NEWT studies, the books he'd read, the theories he'd learned. The handlers listened, occasionally nodding or interjecting with corrections based on real-world experience. "Book learning is good," Stefan said when Charlie finished. "Books keep you alive when you remember the warnings. But real dragons, they don't follow the books exactly. Every dragon is individual, yes. Different personality, different moods, different tolerances. You must learn to read them, to feel what they're feeling, to know when to approach and when to retreat." "How do you learn that?" Charlie asked. "Time," Anna said simply. "Observation, patience, mistakes, though we try to keep those non-fatal. Starting tomorrow, you'll shadow each of us in rotation, learning our methods, our dragons. You'll muck out nesting sites, prepare food, maintain equipment. Gradually, as you prove yourself capable, you'll take on more responsibility. In 6 months, if all goes well, you'll have your own assigned dragons to monitor. 6 months. It seemed like forever, and no time at all. Don't worry, Alexei said, catching Charlie's expression. 6 months passes quickly when you're constantly exhausted and occasionally terrified. More laughter. Then Stefan raised his mug. A toast to Charlie Weasley, newest handler. May your wits be sharp, your reflexes quick, and your dragonhide armor properly maintained. To Charlie, everyone chorused, mugs clinking together. Charlie raised his own mug, warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the ale. These people, these brave, scarred, slightly mad people who dedicated their lives to protecting dragons, they were his colleagues now, his team, his family, in a way. "Thank you," he said, and meant it with his whole heart. That night, lying in his narrow bed, Charlie listened to the mountain wind and thought about the path that had brought him here. Hogwarts seemed like a lifetime ago, though he'd left just weeks before. The burrow, his family, England itself. All of it felt distant now, separated by more than just miles. He thought of his mother's tears when he'd told her he was leaving the country, of his father's quiet pride mixed with concern, of Bill's understanding. Bill, who'd taken his own unconventional path, working as a curse-breaker for Gringotts in Egypt, of Percy's disapproval at turning down a proper career, of the twins' enthusiasm, treating it like a grand adventure, of Ron, still at Hogwarts, writing letters full of questions about dragons, of little Ginny, making him promise to tell her everything about Romania. He missed them. Of course he did. They were his family, his foundation, his home in the deepest sense. But this was his destiny, this wild place, these magnificent creatures, this life of purpose and danger and profound meaning. Tomorrow, his real education would begin. Tomorrow, he would start learning not from books, but from living dragons, from handlers who'd spent decades mastering this dangerous art. Tomorrow, he would take his first steps toward becoming what he'd always known he would be. A dragon keeper, a guardian of ancient fire, a bridge between human and dragon, speaking a language older than words. Sleep took him gently, and he dreamed of scales gleaming in starlight, of intelligent eyes meeting his without fear, of wings carrying him higher than any broom ever could, of a belonging so complete it felt like coming home after a long, long journey. Above the compound, dragons wheeled through the night sky, their calls echoing across the mountains. And perhaps, in their ancient way, they sensed the new presence among the handlers, a young wizard with red hair and freckles, with courage in his heart and gentleness in his hands, who would one day understand them, better than almost any human ever had. But that understanding would come slowly, earned through patience and dedication and love. For tonight, Charlie simply slept, dreaming his dragon dreams, safe in the mountains, exactly where he belonged. 6 months had passed since Charlie arrived at the Romanian dragon sanctuary, and the mountains had worked their magic on him. His skin was bronzed from long days in the high-altitude sun, his muscles lean and strong from climbing rocky slopes and wrestling with dragon equipment. His hands, once smooth from wand work and Quidditch, now bore the calluses of real labour, the good, honest kind that came from purpose and dedication. He'd learned more in those 6 months than in 7 years at Hogwarts. How to read a dragon's body language from half a mile away, the tilt of a wing that meant agitation, the angle of a neck that signaled curiosity or threat. How to prepare the massive quantities of food required, whole deer, wild boar, carefully, supplemented with minerals and magical nutrients. How to maintain dragonhide armor, mending burns and tears with specialized spells and careful stitching. How to move through dragon territory without triggering territorial aggression, respecting boundaries invisible to human eyes but clear as walls to dragons. And most importantly, he'd learned patience. Dragons moved on their own time, acknowledged you on their own terms, trusted you only after you'd proven yourself worthy again and again and again. Charlie had been assigned 3 dragons to monitor: a Romanian longhorn named Preda, a Swedish short snout called Frost, and his favourite, though he'd never admit it aloud, a Romanian ridgeback named Norberta. Norberta was magnificent. She was young for a ridgeback, only 15 years old, with scales the colour of midnight touched with deep crimson, like embers hidden in coal. Her eyes were golden, intelligent, and somehow sad, in a way Charlie couldn't quite explain. She'd bonded with him faster than anyone expected. Within 3 months, she would allow him to approach her nesting site, to inspect her wings for injuries, even to rest his hand against her scaled flank and feel the furnace heat of her inner fire. "She's chosen you," Anna had said, watching from a safe distance as Charlie checked Norberta's claws for cracks. "That's rare. Most ridgebacks are too aggressive to bond with handlers, but she trusts you." "I trust her too," Charlie had replied simply, and he did. With his life. There was something in Norberta's eyes that spoke of understanding, of recognition, as if she knew he would never harm her, would always protect her, would stand between her and any threat. That trust would soon be tested. It was a crisp autumn morning when Charlie first noticed something was wrong. He'd risen early, as always, to make his rounds before breakfast. The valley was bathed in that peculiar pre-dawn light that turned everything silver and mysterious. Mist rising from the river like spirits dancing. He'd checked on Preda first. The longhorn was fine, drowsing in her cave, barely acknowledging him with one sleepy eye. Frost was hunting, a dark shape against the lightening sky, pursuing a mountain goat with single-minded focus. But when Charlie reached Norberta's territory, high on the eastern ridge, something felt off. The ridgeback was agitated, pacing back and forth along the ridgeline, her wings half extended, her head swinging from side to side as if searching for something. When she saw Charlie, she made a sound. Not quite a roar, more like a question, plaintive and worried. "Hey, girl," Charlie called softly, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "What's wrong? What are you looking for?" Norberta lowered her massive head, snorting warm air that smelled of sulphur and smoke. She nudged Charlie's shoulder, gently, for a dragon, though it still nearly knocked him off his feet, and then turned to stare down into the valley to the east, the wild valley beyond the sanctuary's boundaries. Charlie followed her gaze, but saw nothing unusual, just trees and rocks and morning mist. But Norberta's anxiety was palpable, her scales rippling with tension. "I'll look into it," Charlie promised, running his hand along her neck. "I promise. If something's wrong, we'll fix it." He spent another 20 minutes trying to calm her, but her agitation only increased. Finally, he retreated, promising to return soon, and hurried back to the compound to report. Anna listened to his description with a frown deepening on her weathered face. Agitated but not injured. No signs of illness? None. She kept staring east, into the wild valley, like she sensed something out there. Dragons have senses we don't, Stefan rumbled, stroking his mustache thoughtfully. If she's worried, there's reason. We should investigate. I'll go, Charlie volunteered immediately. Not alone you won't, Anna said firmly. Alexei, go with him. Take tracking equipment. If there's anything unusual in the Eastern Valley, poachers, illegal magical activity, anything, I want to know about it. Charlie and Alexei set out within the hour, packs laden with supplies, wands ready, senses alert. The Eastern Valley was technically outside sanctuary jurisdiction, wild territory where few wizards ventured. The terrain was rough, the magic unpredictable, and the creatures that lived there, both magical and mundane, were best left undisturbed. But if something there was threatening the dragons, they needed to know. They hiked for hours, following game trails and dried stream beds, moving steadily eastward. The forest grew darker, denser, the pines giving way to older trees, oak and ash and beech, gnarled and ancient, their branches twisted into shapes that seemed almost deliberate. This place feels wrong, Alexei muttered, his usual cheerfulness subdued. His hand rested on his wand. The magic here is sour. Charlie felt it too. The wild magic he'd grown. To love in the sanctuary was clean and pure, untainted. But here, it felt corrupted somehow, turned inward, twisted. They pressed on, and as the sun reached its zenith, they found the first sign. A clearing, roughly circular, where nothing grew. The earth was scorched black, but not from a dragon fire. Charlie knew dragon fire, and this was different. Colder, somehow, despite the char. And scratched into the blackened earth were symbols, runes that made Charlie's eyes hurt to look at them directly. Dark magic, Alexei breathed. Old dark magic. Charlie, we should... A sound cut him off. A roar, but wrong, twisted, filled with pain and rage in equal measure. It came from deeper in the valley, echoing off the rocks. Charlie and Alexei exchanged glances. Every instinct screamed at them to retreat, to get help, to not investigate alone. But that roar, something was suffering. They moved toward the sound, wands raised, hearts pounding. The forest opened into another clearing. And what? They saw there made Charlie's blood run cold. A dragon. But wrong. So terribly wrong. It was chained to the ground, with massive links of iron inscribed with more of those painful runes. But worse than the chains was the dragon itself. It looked like a common Welsh green, but its scales were mottled, patchy. Some areas showing raw flesh beneath. One wing was malformed, twisted at an unnatural angle. Its eyes, dragons should have intelligent, aware eyes, were clouded, confused, filled with pain. And standing near it, taking notes in a leather-bound journal, was a wizard, tall, thin, dressed in black robes, his face hidden beneath a hood. Fascinating, the wizard murmured, apparently unaware of Charlie and Alexei. The runic integration is progressing, though the physical mutations are more extreme than anticipated. Subject 7 shows increased aggression, but decreased cognitive function. Not ideal for our purposes, but the strength enhancement is remarkable. What have you done? Charlie's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. The wizard spun, wand flying to his hand with practiced speed. For a moment they stood, frozen, two young handlers facing a dark wizard, a tortured dragon between them. Then several things happened at once. The wizard fired a spell, purple light, something nasty that Charlie barely deflected. Alexei returned fire, red sparks flying. The dragon roared in pain and confusion, straining against its chains. And from the trees behind the wizard, 3 more figures emerged, all hooded, all armed. "Run!" Alexei shouted, grabbing Charlie's arm. "We're outnumbered! Run!" They ran. Spells flew past them, scorching trees, exploding rocks. Charlie's heart hammered in his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind them, he could hear the wizards giving chase, could hear that agonized dragon roaring, could feel the wrongness of what they'd witnessed like a physical weight. They burst through the forest, stumbling over roots, branches, tearing at their clothes and skin. A spell caught Alexei's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Charlie grabbed him, hauled him up, half-carried him as they ran. The sanctuary boundary was close. Charlie could feel it, could sense the protective wards that marked the edge of their territory. If they could just reach it. They crashed through the invisible barrier, and immediately the pursuit stopped. Charlie and Alexei collapsed on the sanctuary side, gasping for breath, bleeding from a dozen small cuts, adrenaline singing through their veins. Charlie looked back. Through the trees, he could see the hooded figures standing at the boundary, watching. One of them, the first wizard, the one with the journal, raised his hand in a mocking salute. Then they turned and melted back into the forest, vanishing like smoke. We have to," Alexei gasped, clutching his injured shoulder. "Have to tell Anna." "I know," Charlie said, his voice shaking. But he wasn't looking at Alexei, was looking back toward where they'd come from, thinking of that tortured dragon, those terrible runes, that wizard's casual notation of Subject 7, which meant there were at least 6 others. 6 other dragons suffering, twisted by dark magic, changed into something they were never meant to be. And Norberta had known. She'd sensed it, felt it somehow, and tried to warn him. The compound erupted into controlled chaos when Charlie and Alexei stumbled in, bleeding and wild-eyed with their story. Anna took charge immediately, sending for healing supplies, for communication equipment, for the senior handlers. Charlie sat in the medical bay while Ingrid tended his cuts, but he barely felt the sting of the healing salves. His mind was back in that clearing, watching that mutated dragon suffer, seeing those symbols that hurt to look at, hearing that wizard's clinical assessment of torture. "Dark wizards," Stefan growled, pacing the room like a caged bear. "Using dragons for experiments. This is worse than poaching. This is abomination. We need to contact the Romanian ministry," Anna said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "And the International Confederation. This is beyond our jurisdiction, beyond our authority. We're handlers, not auras." "But we can't just leave that dragon there," Charlie protested. "It's suffering. It needs help." "We can't help it if we're dead," Anna said bluntly. "Charlie, you're young, you're brave, and you care deeply. All admirable qualities. But you saw how many of them there were. We're 8 handlers, not a strike force. We report this, we let the authorities handle it, and we increase our own security to protect our dragons." It was the practical, sensible thing to do. Charlie knew that. But the image of that dragon, eyes clouded with pain, scales falling away to reveal raw flesh, wings twisted wrong, haunted him. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, listening to the wind, thinking about Subject 7 and the 6 others, thinking about dark wizards who saw dragons not as magnificent creatures deserving of respect and protection, but as tools, weapons, things to be used and discarded. Finally he rose, dressed, and made his way to Norberta's ridge. The ridgeback was still awake, still agitated, as if she too couldn't rest, knowing something was wrong in the wild valley. Charlie approached her slowly, and she lowered her massive head to him. He rested his forehead against her scaled snout, feeling her heat, her strength, her trust. "I know," he whispered. "I know you're worried. I am too. But we'll fix this. Somehow we'll make it right. I promise you." Norberta made a low sound, almost a purr, almost a growl. Her golden eyes reflected the starlight, ancient and knowing. And Charlie understood, in that moment, that this was bigger than he'd imagined. This wasn't just about one tortured dragon in a clearing. This was about something dark and organized, something that had been happening for who knew how long, something that threatened every dragon in these mountains. The authorities would investigate. They had to. But Charlie also knew that bureaucracy moved slowly, that by the time official action was taken, those dark wizards might vanish, taking their victims with them. He couldn't let that happen, wouldn't let that happen. "We'll stop them," he promised Norberta, promised himself, promised the night and the mountains and every dragon that called this place home. Whatever it takes. The ridgeback spread her wings, magnificent, powerful, unbroken, and roared into the darkness. It was a sound of defiance, of protection, of warning to anything that might threaten her home. Charlie felt that raw echo in his chest, felt it settle into his bones like an oath, like destiny speaking in dragon tongue. The darkness was gathering, yes, but so was the light. So was courage, so was the fierce, unwavering determination of those who would stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. 3 weeks had passed since Charlie and Alexei's encounter in the Wild Valley, and the waiting was agony. The Romanian ministry had dispatched investigators, of course. Official-looking wizards in pressed robes had arrived, taken statements, examined the sanctuary's wards, promised swift action. They'd ventured into the Eastern Valley with a security detail, returned empty-handed, and reported finding nothing. No clearing, no chains, no evidence of dark magic. Just trees and rocks and innocent wilderness. They covered their tracks, Charlie had insisted to anyone who would listen. They knew we'd report it. They cleaned up, moved their operation. Perhaps, the lead investigator had said with barely concealed condescension. Or perhaps, Mr. Weasley, the stress of your position and the high altitude caused you and Mr. Volkov to experience a shared hallucination. It happens more often than you'd think. Alexei had nearly hexed the man. Charlie had held him back, but barely. The investigators left, filing their report, essentially closing the case. No evidence, no crime. The sanctuary handlers were advised to remain vigilant and report any further unusual experiences. But the dragons knew better. Norberta remained agitated, her anxiety increasing with each passing day. The other dragons grew restless too, as if sensing something wrong in the mountains around them. Even Preda, usually placid and content, had taken to pacing her cave, rumbling low warnings to threats only she could perceive. And then, on a frost-touched morning in late October, Norberta disappeared. Charlie discovered it during his dawn rounds. Her nesting site was empty, her usual perches abandoned. He'd searched for hours, calling her name, sending up signal spells, checking every cave and valley she might have flown to. Nothing. By noon, the entire sanctuary staff was searching. Dragons didn't just vanish. They were territorial, predictable in their patterns, especially ones like Norberta, who'd bonded with a handler. For her to leave without a trace meant something was terribly, terribly wrong. They found the first clue at the sanctuary's eastern boundary, where the protective wards met wild territory, scorch marks on the ground, but not from dragonfire. The same cold, wrong-burning Charlie had seen in that clearing 3 weeks ago, and scratched into a nearby boulder, barely visible, a rune. Anna traced it with her finger, her face grave. Druid magic. Ancient stuff, older than the Ministry, older than modern wizardry, but corrupted, twisted into something dark. "They took her," Charlie said, his voice flat with certainty and rage. "The same wizards from before. They took Norberta." "We don't know that." "Yes, we do." Charlie's hands clenched into fists. "We saw what they're doing, experimenting on dragons, mutating them with dark runic magic. Now Norberta's gone, and there's their calling card right at our boundary. They took her, Anna, and the Ministry won't do anything because they didn't find anything last time." Stefan laid a heavy hand on Charlie's shoulder. "Easy, boy. We all want to find her. But rushing off angry and unprepared won't help Norberta. It'll just get you killed." "Then what do we do?" Charlie's voice cracked with frustration and fear. "Just wait. File another report that goes nowhere while they torture her?" Aina and Stefan exchanged a long look, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Anna sighed. "We investigate ourselves, carefully, quietly. We find their operation, we gather real evidence, and then we decide what to do." "The Ministry won't like us operating outside our authority," Ingrid pointed out. "The Ministry," Anna said coldly, "failed to do their job. This is our sanctuary. These are our dragons. Norberta is one of ours. We protect our own." Charlie felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. "When do we leave?" "We plan first," Stefan said firmly. "We research those runes, figure out what we're dealing with. We prepare properly. Equipment, defensive spells, emergency protocols. We assemble a team of handlers who know what they're walking into. And we do it right, because we won't get a second chance." They spent 2 days in preparation, and every hour felt like an eternity to Charlie. While Anna and Stefan pored over ancient texts about druid magic and dark runic practices, Charlie and Alexei gathered supplies: dragonhide armor, emergency portkeys, healing potions, tracking equipment, communication mirrors. Ingrid pulled Charlie aside on the second evening, pressing a small vial into his hand. "Dragon's blood tonic," she said quietly. "If you're badly injured and can't reach a healer immediately, drink this. It won't heal you completely, but it'll keep you alive long enough to get help." "Thank you," Charlie said, tucking the vial carefully into his pack. "Bring her back," Ingrid said, and there were tears in her sharp blue eyes. "Bring Norberta back, Charlie. I will. I promise." That night, Charlie barely slept. He kept seeing Norberta's golden eyes, kept remembering the trust in them, kept imagining her chained like that other dragon had been, suffering, confused, wondering why her handler hadn't protected her. "I'm coming," he thought into the darkness. "Hold on, I'm coming." They set out at dawn. Charlie, Alexei, Stefan, and Anna. The twins stayed behind to protect the sanctuary and care for the remaining dragons. Marcus and Diana manned the communication mirrors, ready to alert authorities or provide backup if needed. The team moved swiftly through the eastern forest, retracing the path Charlie and Alexei had taken 3 weeks before. The October air was crisp and cold, their breath misting, frost crunching under their boots. Above them, the sky was grey and heavy with the promise of snow. They found the first clearing easily enough, the scorched earth where they'd seen those painful runes. But as they'd expected, it was empty now, abandoned. The runes had been scratched out, the evidence erased. "They're covering their tracks as they go," Anna observed, crouching to examine the disturbed earth. "Professional, organized. This isn't some random dark wizard experimenting in isolation. This is planned, funded, systematic." "Which way?" Charlie asked, fighting impatience. Stefan closed his eyes, muttering a tracking spell, his wand moving in slow circles. North and west. Something magical that way. Something big, trying to hide but not quite managing it. Could be wards, could be active spell work. Either way, it's our best lead. They pressed on, climbing higher into the mountains. The trees grew sparser, the terrain rockier. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier, coating everything in white silence. Hours passed. They moved in tense quiet, wands ready, senses alert for any sign of danger. The mountains rose around them, vast and indifferent, ancient witnesses to whatever human drama played out in their shadows. As afternoon faded toward evening, they crested a ridge and looked down into a hidden valley Charlie hadn't known existed. It was smaller than the Sanctuary Valley, ringed by sheer cliffs that would be nearly impossible to climb without magic. And there, nestled against the northern cliff face, partially hidden by snow and shadow, ruins. Not natural formations, not random rocks, deliberate structures, old beyond measure, built from massive stones covered in carvings and symbols that hurt to look at directly. The architecture was unlike anything Charlie had seen, older than Hogwarts, older than any wizard construction he knew. This was druid work, ancient magic, from before wands, before the ministry, before the modern magical world. "By Merlin's beard," Stefan breathed. "That's a druid sanctuary. Has to be at least 2,000 years old, maybe older. And someone's using it," Anna said grimly, pointing. Lights flickered among the ruins, wandlight, lamplight, the glow of active magic. And even from this distance, Charlie could hear it. Dragons. Multiple dragons, their calls echoing off the cliff walls, sounds of distress and confusion and anger. "We need to get closer," Charlie said, already moving. "Carefully," Anna cautioned, grabbing his arm. "We don't know how many of them there are, what defenses they have. We observe first, then we decide our next move." They descended into the valley slowly, using every scrap of cover, casting disillusionment charms and muffling spells. The ruins grew larger as they approached. Massive stone pillars carved with spirals and runes, archways that framed the darkening sky, walls that still stood despite millennia of weather and time. And between the ruins, moving with purpose, wizards. Charlie counted at least 8, maybe more. They wore dark robes marked with symbols he didn't recognize, and they moved with the confidence of people operating in their own secure territory. The team found shelter behind a fallen pillar, close enough now to see details, but hopefully still hidden. Charlie peered around the stone, and his breath caught. Dragons. 5 of them, visible from this angle, and all wrong. Mutated, like the Welsh green they'd seen before. One had scales that seemed to shift and writhe as if alive independently. Another had 3 eyes instead of 2, the third one weeping dark fluid. A third had wings so malformed it clearly couldn't fly, could barely move. And there, Charlie's heart clenched. There was Norberta. She was chained in the center of the ruins, massive runic circles drawn around her in something that glowed sickly green. Her scales had already started changing, patches of midnight blue turning murky and dull. But her golden eyes were still clear, still aware, and filled with terror. She saw Charlie. He would swear to his dying day that she saw him, even through the disillusionment charm, even across the distance. Her head lifted slightly, her eyes locked on his position, and she made a sound, a keening, desperate sound that tore at Charlie's heart. "We have to..." Charlie started to rise, to rush forward, but Stefan's massive hand clamped on his shoulder, holding him in place with iron strength. "Not yet," Stefan hissed. "We're outnumbered, outpositioned. We need to understand what we're facing." As if in answer, a figure emerged from the largest intact structure, a building carved directly into the cliff face. The wizard was tall, elegant, with silver hair and robes of deep purple marked with those same painful symbols. He carried a staff carved with runes, and power radiated from him like heat from a furnace. "Status report," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. Eastern European accent, possibly Romanian, cultured and educated. One of the dark-robed wizards hurried forward. "The Ridgeback is proving more resistant than previous subjects. The initial runic integration is proceeding, but her will is strong. She fights the transformation." "Of course she does," the silver-haired wizard said, approaching Norberta with casual confidence. "Romanian Ridgebacks are among the most strong-willed of dragon species. That's precisely why she's valuable. A weapon needs will, needs intelligence, just directed properly. Increase the runic frequency, double the integration sessions. Master Casimir, if we push too hard, then she'll break and we'll learn from the failure," Casimir said coldly. "We have 5 other successful subjects. One loss is acceptable if it yields useful data. These creatures are tools, nothing more. Don't develop sentiment." Charlie felt Alexei tense beside him, heard Anna's sharp intake of breath. But it was Stefan who spoke, his voice barely a whisper, but shaking with rage. "Weapon breeding. They're trying to create controllable dragon weapons. This is evil beyond measure." "We need help," Anna said quietly, urgently. "We can't handle this alone. 8 of them, at least, plus whatever defenses they have in those ruins, plus dark magic we don't fully understand. We need auras, we need curse breakers, There's no time," Charlie interrupted, watching as 2 wizards approached Norberta with wands raised, beginning some spell that made her thrash against her chains, made her scream in pain. "They're hurting her right now. By the time we get help, she could be dead or transformed, beyond saving," Alexei finished grimly. "Charlie's right. We have to act now." 4 against 8 or more, Anna said, in their fortified position, using magic we don't understand. This is suicide. But even as she said it, Charlie saw her eyes scanning the ruins, calculating angles and approach vectors, planning, because she knew, as they all did, that they couldn't leave, couldn't abandon Norberta and the other dragons, couldn't let this evil continue. "We don't have to fight them all," Stefan said slowly, his tactical mind working. "We just need to free the dragons, break their containment, disrupt their runes, create enough chaos that the dragons can escape, or turn on their captors. And hope we don't get killed in the process," Alexei added. Do you have a better plan? Stefan asked. Silence. The only sounds were the wind through the ruins, the crackle of dark magic, and Norberta's cries of pain. Charlie looked at his team, Alexei, young and brave and ready to follow him into danger. Stefan, scarred and experienced, carrying the weight of 30 years protecting dragons. Anna, their leader, fierce and dedicated, willing to risk everything for her charges. Then he looked at Norberta, suffering in those chains, fighting the magic that sought to corrupt her. The choice was clear. It had always been clear. We go in quiet, Charlie said, his voice steady despite the fear and adrenaline singing through his veins. We split up, 2 teams. Anna and Stefan, you focus on disrupting those main runics, circles, breaking the containment. Alexei and I will target Norberta's chains specifically. Once she's free, once any of them are free, the dragons will do half our work for us. It's insane, Anna said. Yes, we'll probably die. Possibly. But we're doing it anyway. Yes. Anna smiled then, fierce and proud. You've learned well, Charlie Weasley. You've become a true handler, willing to face impossible odds for your dragons. All right. We do this carefully, we do this smart, and we do it now, before I come to my senses and realize how monumentally stupid this is. They checked their equipment one final time. Wands, emergency portkeys, healing potions, dragonhide armor secured. Stefan muttered protective spells over each of them. Anna synchronized their communication mirrors. Alexei gripped Charlie's shoulder, a brief moment of solidarity between friends about to face death together. For the dragons, Stefan said quietly. For the dragons, they echoed. And then they moved, shadows in the gathering darkness, 4 handlers against an army, 4 souls willing to sacrifice everything for creatures most feared and few understood. The battle for the dragon's souls, and perhaps their own, was about to begin. The ruins loomed around them like the bones of giants, ancient and terrible in the falling snow. Charlie and Alexei moved through the shadows on the eastern approach, while Anna and Stefan circled toward the west, all of them invisible beneath disillusionment charms, all of them acutely aware that discovery meant death. Charlie's heart hammered against his ribs as he crept closer to where Norberta was chained. He could see her more clearly now, see the pain in her golden eyes, see how the dark runes glowed against her scales, see the way she trembled with the effort of resisting whatever magic they were forcing into her. Hold on, he thought desperately. Just hold on a little longer. 2 dark wizards stood guard near Norberta, their attention focused on maintaining the runic circles, wands moving in complex patterns that made the air shimmer with sick green light. Beyond them, Charlie could see the other captive dragons, 5 tortured souls, some barely recognizable as the magnificent creatures they should have been. And there, near the cliff face, stood Master Casimir, that silver-haired architect of this nightmare, observing his work with the detached interest of a scholar rather than the horror of a monster. Charlie checked his position. Alexei was 10 feet to his left, barely visible, even knowing where to look. Across the ruins, somewhere in the darkness, Anna and Stefan would be moving into position. They'd agreed on a signal. Anna would send up red sparks, and then all hell would break loose. Charlie's hand tightened on his wand. He'd never been in real combat before, never faced dark wizards with murder in their hearts and evil in their spells. Hogwarts had taught him defensive magic, yes, but this was different. This was kill or be killed. Do or die. No professors to intervene if things went wrong. Fear coursed through him, cold and sharp. But underneath the fear was something stronger. Love. Love for Norberta, for all dragons, for the wild and beautiful creatures that deserved protection, not torture. Love for his team, his fellow handlers willing to risk everything. Love for what was right, even when right was terrifying. Red sparks shot into the sky. Everything happened at once. Stefan's booming voice roared a blasting curse that shattered one of the main runic pillars. Stone exploded, ancient symbols cracking and failing, and immediately the containment around 2 of the mutated dragons flickered and died. The dragons, sensing freedom, lunged forward with roars of rage and pain. One, the 3-eyed monstrosity, immediately attacked the nearest dark wizard, jaws closing around him with brutal finality. The other, the one with writhing scales, spread malformed wings and launched itself at the cliff-face structure, breathing gouts of corrupted fire. Chaos erupted. Dark wizards scattered, some running for cover, others turning to face the threat. Wands blazing with spells Charlie didn't recognize. Shouts in Romanian and other languages filled the air, mixing with dragon roars and the crack of spellfire. Charlie didn't waste the moment. He dropped his disillusionment charm and ran toward Norberta, Alexei right beside him. The 2 guards near the ridgeback spun toward them, surprise on their faces turning quickly to murderous intent. "Stupefy!" Charlie shouted, his spell catching one guard square in the chest, dropping him instantly. The second guard was faster, deflecting Alexei's hex and returning fire with something purple and vicious that Alexei barely dodged. They traded spells rapid fire, the air crackling with magic, while Charlie focused on Norberta's chains. The iron links were inscribed with runes, pulsing with dark magic that burned to look at. Charlie raised his wand, trying to remember everything he'd learned about counter-curses, about breaking enchantments, about... "Behind you!" Alexei screamed. Charlie spun. A dark wizard had appeared from nowhere, wand already moving through the motions of what looked like a cutting curse. Time seemed to slow. Charlie saw the spell forming, saw death coming toward him in a slash of silver light, knew he couldn't dodge in time. Alexei threw himself between them. The curse caught him across the chest, blood blooming dark against his robes. He gasped, stumbled, fell. "No!" Charlie's scream was raw, primal. He hit the dark wizard with every spell he knew, not even conscious of what he was casting, just pouring magic and rage and grief into his wand until the wizard collapsed, unconscious or dead. Charlie didn't know, and didn't care. He dropped to his knees beside Alexei. His friend's face was pale, his breathing shallow, blood spreading too fast across his chest. "Stay with me," Charlie begged, fumbling for healing potions, for anything. "Alexei, please." "The dragon," Alexei gasped, blood on his lips. "Save the dragon." "I'll save you both. Just hold on." "Charlie." Anna's voice cut through the chaos. She and Stefan were fighting back to back against 4 wizards, barely holding their own, defensive spells flying fast and desperate. "The main array! Break the main runic array!" Charlie looked up, torn between Alexei bleeding out beside him and the mission, the dragons, everything they'd come here to do. His eyes found the structure Casimir had emerged from earlier. There, carved into the cliff face, a massive runic circle pulsing with power. That had to be it. The central control, the heart of their dark magic. But Alexei was dying. Norberta was suffering, his team was outnumbered, and Charlie was just one person, just one 20-year-old handler who'd thought courage would be enough. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Casimir's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Despite the battle raging around him, enough! Cease this futile resistance! He raised his runic staff, and power exploded from it, a wave of dark magic that knocked everyone off their feet. Dragons, handlers, dark wizards, all of them thrown backward, stunned, struggling to rise. Charlie pushed himself up, tasting blood, his ears ringing. He saw Anna trying to stand, saw Stefan sprawled unconscious, saw Alexei not moving at all. Casimir stood in the center of the ruins, untouched, terrifying in his power. "You sanctimonious fools," he said, almost conversationally. "Did you think you could stop this? Do you have any idea what we're building here? These dragons will revolutionize magical warfare. They will be sold to the highest bidders, governments, organizations, anyone willing to pay for controllable weapons of mass destruction. We're talking about power that could reshape the balance of the magical world." "You're talking about torture," Charlie spat, forcing himself to his feet despite his shaking legs. "About corrupting magnificent creatures into abominations." "I'm talking about progress," Casimir corrected, "about harnessing nature for human benefit. Dragons are powerful, but wild, unpredictable. We're simply refining them, making them useful. And you, boy, you're going to watch as we complete the process, starting with your precious Ridgeback." He turned toward Norberta, raising his staff, beginning a spell that made the runes on her chains burn bright and terrible. Norberta screamed. It was a sound Charlie would hear in his nightmares forever. Pure agony, pure terror, the sound of a soul being broken. And something inside Charlie broke too. He looked at the scene before him with sudden, terrible clarity. Alexei, possibly dying or already dead. Stefan, unconscious. Anna, struggling to her feet but clearly drained, her magic nearly spent. 4 handlers against 8 or more dark wizards, against Master Casimir with his ancient staff and terrible power, against a fortified position with wards and dark magic they barely understood. They couldn't win this fight. Not the way they'd planned. Not by freeing all the dragons and hoping for chaos. But maybe they could still stop it. Maybe Charlie could still prevent this evil from spreading, from these weaponized dragons being sold to fuel wars and destruction across the world. His eyes went to that central runic array carved into the cliff, the heart of the operation, the source of the dark magic binding all these dragons. If he could destroy it, really destroy it, not just disrupt it, but shatter it completely, the whole system would collapse. The mutations might even be reversible. The operation would be finished. But to generate enough magical force to destroy something that powerful, something carved into living stone and charged with ancient dark magic, it would take everything Charlie had. All his magic, all his life force, channeled through a spell of destruction. So powerful it would burn him out, leave him dead or worse. And he wouldn't have time to free Norberta first, wouldn't be able to save Alexei, wouldn't be able to help Anna and Stefan escape. He would have to choose, save one dragon he loved, try to get his team out alive, but let the operation continue. Let these dark wizards eventually finish their work and sell weapon dragons to the highest bidders. Or destroy the entire operation, save countless future victims, prevent a magical catastrophe, but at the cost of everything. at the cost of Norberta's life and possibly his own. One dragon or the world. Charlie looked at Norberta, met her golden eyes across the ruins, and in that moment, in that eternal, terrible moment, he swore she understood. She saw him, saw his choice, and something in her gaze. It was acceptance. It was trust. It was love. "Do it," she seemed to say. "Do what's right." "I'm sorry," Charlie whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry." He turned toward the cliff face, toward that massive runic array pulsing with dark power. He raised his wand, feeling his magic gather, feeling it build to levels he'd never attempted before. This would be his final spell, his last act, and it had to count. "What are you?" Casimir started, sensing the build-up of power starting to turn. Too late. "Confringo Maxima," Charlie roared, pouring everything he had into the spell, all his magic, all his love, all his grief and rage and desperate hope. The blasting curse that left his wand wasn't red or orange like normal fire. It was white, pure white, hot enough to melt stone, powerful enough to crack mountains. It hit the central runic array dead center. The explosion was cataclysmic. The entire cliff face shattered, ancient runes shattering with it, dark magic unraveling in a cascade of failing spells and breaking enchantments. The ruins shook, pillars cracking, structures collapsing. The power that had bound the dragons, that had twisted them, that had held this terrible operation together. It all came undone in a single, devastating moment. Charlie felt the spell tear through him, felt his magic drain away like water from a broken vessel, felt his life force follow it. He collapsed, his wand falling from nerveless fingers, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. But before the darkness took him, he saw it. Chains breaking, runes dying, dragons, including Norberta, suddenly free. He saw the freed dragons turn on their torturers with the full fury of their kind, saw dark wizards running, screaming, dying, saw Casimir himself trying to flee, only to be caught by the three-eyed dragon and torn apart. He saw Anna dragging Stefan towards safety, saw her eyes find Charlie across the ruins, saw horror and understanding and grief on her face. And he saw Norberta, free but already changing, the mutations taking hold without the runic control to stabilize them, her scales falling away, her wings collapsing, her golden eyes dimming. She crawled toward him, her great bulk moving with terrible slowness, leaving a trail of blood and scales. She reached him just as his vision began to fade, lowered her massive head beside him, her breath hot and smelling of smoke and copper. Charlie raised one trembling hand, touched her snout one last time. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. "I had to. I couldn't let them." She made a sound, soft and low, almost like forgiveness, almost like understanding. Her golden eyes looked into his, and Charlie felt love, gratitude, release. And then she was gone, her body stilling, her eyes going dark, the magnificent creature she'd been fading into death with a final, gentle sigh. Charlie's hand fell away. The darkness rushed in, and his last thought, before unconsciousness claimed him, was a prayer that it had been worth it, that his choice, terrible and necessary and impossible, had saved more than it had cost. Somewhere above the ruins, snow continued to fall, soft and silent, covering the devastation in white. The dragons who'd survived, those whose mutations had been early enough to reverse when the magic broke, fled into the night, returning to the wild, free at last. The dark wizards who hadn't been killed by dragons or the explosions scattered, their operation destroyed, their leader dead, their dreams of power turned to ash. And in the center of the ruins, Anna worked desperately over two bodies, Charlie and Alexei, while Stefan regained consciousness and staggered to help, both of them fighting against time and death itself to save their young handlers. Whether they would succeed, whether Charlie and Alexei would survive the night, whether the choice Charlie made would haunt him forever or give him peace. These questions hung in the cold mountain air, unanswered. But one thing was certain. Charlie Weasley had faced the impossible choice, and he had chosen. Not the easy path, not the one that would cost him less, but the right one. The one that saved the most lives, even at the price of the one life he'd most wanted to save. Charlie Weasley woke 3 days later in a bed at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries, his body wrapped in bandages, his magic so depleted he could barely lift his hand. The first thing he saw was his mother's face, Molly Weasley, tear-stained and exhausted, her hand gripping his, as if she'd never let go. "Mum?" His voice was a rasp, his throat raw. "Oh, Charlie! Oh, my boy!" She dissolved into tears, pressing kisses to his forehead, his cheeks, anywhere she could reach. "You're awake. You're alive. We thought the healers said—" "Alexei!" Charlie interrupted, sudden terror gripping him. "Is he—" "Alive?" a familiar voice said from the doorway. Anna stepped into the room, looking worn and aged beyond her years, but her eyes were warm. "Barely, but alive. He's in the room next door, recovering. You both nearly died, Charlie. You poured so much magic into that spell that you should be dead. The only reason you're not is because Stefan got you to a healer in time, and because apparently Weasleys are too stubborn to die when they're supposed to." Charlie closed his eyes, relief washing over him so powerfully his chest ached. Alexei was alive. He hadn't lost his friend. One life saved, at least. And Norberta, the name hurt to say. Anna's expression softened with grief. "I'm sorry, Charlie. The mutations were too far progressed. When the runic control broke, her body couldn't stabilize. She died quickly, peacefully. You were with her at the end." Charlie had known, had felt it in that moment when her eyes dimmed, when her final breath whispered against his hand. But hearing it confirmed, knowing it was real and permanent and final. The tears came then, hot and bitter and endless. Molly held him while he sobbed, while grief poured out of him in waves. He'd saved the world, yes. Stopped a terrible evil, yes. Made the right choice, yes. But right didn't mean painless. Right didn't mean it didn't cost everything. The story of what happened in those Romanian ruins spread through the magical world like wildfire. 4 dragon handlers taking on a dark wizard operation alone. The destruction of a black market ring that had been breeding weaponized dragons. The death of Master Casimir and the exposure of his international conspiracy. Buyers in 3 countries. Funding from shadowy organizations, plans to create armies of corrupted dragons. The Romanian ministry, embarrassed by their initial dismissal of Charlie's report, launched a full investigation. They found evidence of the operation stretching back years, found records of 20 dragons that had passed through Casimir's hands, found contracts with buyers from as far as Asia and South America. If Charlie hadn't stopped it when he did, the healers and investigators concluded within a year there could have been weaponized dragons in war zones across the globe. Hundreds, possibly thousands, of lives saved by the destruction of that operation. The International Confederation of Wizards awarded Charlie and his team the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, for extraordinary bravery in the face of dark magic. There were ceremonies, speeches, articles in magical newspapers across Europe. Charlie attended them all with a hollow feeling in his chest, accepting accolades that felt like ashes, shaking hands with officials who called him a hero, while all he could think about was Norberta's golden eyes going dark. "You did the right thing," everyone told him. Anna, Stefan, the investigators, the Minister of Magic himself. "I know," Charlie would reply, and he did know. Intellectually, rationally, he knew his choice had been correct, necessary, the only option that prevented greater catastrophe. But knowledge didn't make it hurt less. It took 6 months before Charlie's magic fully recovered. 6 months of gentle exercises, of rebuilding his strength, bit by bit, of learning his limits all over again. The healers said he was lucky. Many wizards who depleted themselves so completely never regained full magical ability. But Charlie had youth on his side, and that Weasley stubborn streak, and a bone-deep need to return to the dragons. Because even in his grief, even haunted by Norberta's death, Charlie couldn't imagine doing anything else. Couldn't imagine leaving the sanctuary, abandoning the other dragons, walking away from the work that gave his sacrifice meaning. Alexei recovered more slowly. The dark curse had damaged him in ways both physical and magical, leaving him with a limp and nerve damage in his left hand. He could no longer handle dragons as actively, couldn't react fast enough, couldn't cast spells with the speed and precision the work required. But he refused to leave, either. "I'll work in research," he said stubbornly, sitting across from Charlie in the sanctuary's library, both of them still healing, still broken but mending. Document dragon behavior. Compile data, help train new handlers. There's more than one way to serve. They were both different now, Charlie realized. The young men who'd set out into those ruins with hope and courage had died there, in a way. What had returned were older souls, scarred and grieving, carrying the weight of impossible choices and terrible knowledge. But they'd returned, they'd survived, and slowly, painfully, they would learn to live with what they'd done, what they'd lost, what they'd saved. The sanctuary changed too. The ministry, finally taking dragon protection seriously, increased funding and security. New wards went up, stronger and more sophisticated. Additional handlers were hired and trained. Protocols were established for reporting suspicious activity, for coordinating with international authorities, for never again dismissing warnings as hallucinations. And in the valley, a memorial was erected, a simple stone pillar carved with names, the dragons who'd died in Casimir's operation, including Norberta, the handlers who'd fallen protecting dragons over the years, a reminder of what they fought for, what they'd lost, why the work mattered. Charlie visited that memorial often, especially in the early days. He would stand before Norberta's name, carved in elegant script, and talk to her as if she could hear. "I'm sorry," he'd say. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I had to choose. I hope, wherever dragons go after death, I hope you understand. I hope you forgive me." The wind would whisper through the valley, and sometimes, just sometimes, Charlie would feel a warmth against his chest, right over his heart, like dragon breath, like forgiveness, like love that transcended death. Anna found him there one evening, perhaps a year after that terrible night. She stood beside him in comfortable silence for a long moment before speaking. "She chose too, you know," Anna said softly. "Norberta, in that moment when you looked at each other, when you made your decision, she could have fought you, could have thrashed, broken free, tried to escape. Dragons are strong enough, even chained. But she didn't. She stayed still. She let you do what needed to be done." "You think she understood?" Charlie's voice was rough with unshed tears. "I think dragons are far more intelligent than we give them credit for. I think she loved you, and she knew you loved her, and she trusted you to make the right choice, even when it was the hardest choice imaginable." Charlie absorbed this, turning it over in his mind and heart. It didn't erase the pain, didn't make Norberta any less dead, didn't change what he'd done. But it helped. Somehow it helped. "Thank you," he whispered. Anna gripped his shoulder, solid and warm and alive. "You're a good handler, Charlie Weasley. One of the best I've ever worked with. Norberta was lucky to have you, even for the short time she did. And the dragons we protect now, they're lucky too. Never forget that." The years passed, as years do, gentle and relentless. Charlie grew into his role at the sanctuary, no longer the eager young handler fresh from Hogwarts, but a seasoned expert, respected across the international dragon handling community. He published papers on dragon behavior and conservation. He trained new handlers, passing on not just techniques, but wisdom earned through pain and sacrifice. He traveled too, called on as a consultant when dragon-related incidents occurred around the world. A rogue Hungarian horntail in the Austrian Alps. Charlie talked it down, guided it back to safe territory. A suspected dragon smuggling operation in Spain. Charlie helped authorities dismantle it before it could become another Casimir situation. A sanctuary in Wales needed expertise on aggressive nesting behavior. Charlie spent 3 months there, solving problems, sharing knowledge, always working toward better protection for these magnificent creatures. And when his youngest brother Harry was selected as a Triwizard champion, when the first task involved facing a dragon, Charlie was there, watching from the handler's area, his heart in his throat, terrified for his little brother, but also proud that Harry showed the same courage, the same determination, the same willingness to face impossible odds that defined the Weasley family. After the task, after Harry had somehow survived a Hungarian horntail and claimed the golden egg, Charlie found him in the champion's tent. "You were brilliant," Charlie said, pulling Harry into a fierce hug. "Absolutely mad, but brilliant." "Learned from the best," Harry said with a shaky laugh. "You work with these things every day. How do you stay sane?" Charlie thought of Norberta, of that terrible choice, of all the dragons he'd protected and lost over the years. "You remember why you're doing it," he said finally. "You remember that they're worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth any risk. And you do your best, even when your best means making impossible choices." Something in his tone made Harry look at him more closely, made the boy, young man, really see past the cheerful dragon handler to the scarred soul beneath. "Charlie, are you okay?" "I am now," Charlie said, and meant it. "It took time, but I am now." The sanctuary became more than Charlie's workplace. It became his home, his purpose, his legacy. He never married, never had children in the traditional sense. His life was too consumed by dragons, too dedicated to the work. But he mentored dozens of young handlers over the years, watching them grow from nervous apprentices into confident experts. knowing that his knowledge, his passion, his hard-won wisdom would continue through them. He stayed in touch with his family, of course. Visited the Burrow for holidays, attended Bill's wedding to Fleur, celebrated Percy's promotion at the ministry, mourned with them when Fred died in the war against Voldemort. The Weasley family remained his anchor, his foundation, even as Romania remained his home. And through it all, through decades of work and dedication, Charlie carried Norberta with him, not as a burden or a guilt, but as a reminder of what he was protecting, why it mattered, what sacrifices had been made to ensure dragons remained safe from those who would abuse them. The international dragon protection laws that were strengthened after Casimir's operation. Charlie had helped write them, testifying before the International Confederation of Wizards, sharing his experience, ensuring that never again would dark wizards be able to operate so freely. The improved training protocols for dragon handlers worldwide. Charlie had developed many of them, based on what he'd learned, what he'd survived, what he'd lost. The network of sanctuaries now coordinating across borders, sharing information, watching for threats. Charlie was a founding member, a voice of experience and moral authority. One dragon's death had prevented thousands. One terrible choice had rippled outward through time, saving lives, dragon and human alike, across the globe. In his later years, when silver touched his red hair and his hands grew gnarled with age and old scars, Charlie would sit on the ridge where Norberta used to nest and watch the dragons of the sanctuary soar against the sky. Romanian longhorns and ridgebacks, Swedish short snouts and Welsh greens, all thriving, all protected, all free. Young handlers would sometimes join him, seeking advice, seeking stories, seeking the wisdom of the legendary Charlie Weasley. "Is it true you once destroyed an entire dark wizard operation single-handedly?" they'd ask. "Not single-handedly," Charlie would correct gently. "I had a team. I had friends willing to risk everything. I had a dragon who trusted me enough to let me make an impossible choice. Do you regret it? The choice you made?" Charlie would consider this, as he'd considered it 1,000 times over the years. Regret is complicated. He'd say finally, "I regret that it was necessary. I regret the loss of a magnificent creature. I grieve for Norberta every day. But the choice itself, no, it was right. It was necessary. And it mattered. Sometimes that's all we have, the knowledge that our choices, however painful, mattered." The young handlers would nod, perhaps not fully understanding yet, but storing the words away for when they would face their own impossible moments. And on quiet evenings, when the sanctuary settled into peace, when the dragons roosted and the stars came out above the Carpathian peaks, Charlie would close his eyes and remember. He remembered an 11-year-old boy seeing a dragon in a book for the first time, feeling destiny speak in scales and fire. He remembered the Hogwarts Express carrying him toward his dreams, toward the education that would prepare him for his calling. He remembered his first day in Romania, breathing mountain air, seeing wild dragons soar, knowing he'd found his home. He remembered Norberta, her intelligence, her strength, her trust, the way her golden eyes had looked at him with understanding in that final, terrible moment. He remembered the choice, the impossible, necessary, world-saving choice. And he remembered the years since, the dragons protected, the handlers trained, the lives saved, the legacy built on the foundation of one dragon's sacrifice and one handler's willingness to bear the weight of doing what was right. The wind would whisper through the valley, carrying the calls of dragons settling for the night. And Charlie would feel that warmth against his chest again, that sense of Norberta's presence, her forgiveness, her love that had never truly left him. "Thank you," he would whisper to the night, to the memory, to the dragons flying free because of what had been lost. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for the gift of your life, even though I couldn't save it. I've tried to make it mean something. Hope. I hope that's enough." The stars would wheel overhead in their ancient dance, the same stars that had shone on the burrow when he was born, on Hogwarts when he was sorted, on Romania when he arrived, on those terrible ruins when he made his choice. And in their light, Charlie Weasley, dragon handler, dragon protector, dragon keeper, would find peace. And so, dear listener, we come to the end of our tale. The story of Charlie Weasley, who loved dragons so much he was willing to sacrifice everything for them, including the dragon he loved most, who faced impossible choices with courage and grace, who built a legacy not of glory or fame, but of protection, dedication, and quiet heroism that rippled across the world. In the years after his passing, for all lives must end, even those lived with such purpose, Charlie Weasley was remembered not for the medals he received or the accolades he earned, but for the dragons he saved, the handlers he trained, the example he set. His name was spoken with reverence in sanctuaries across the globe. Young handlers learned his story, understood his choice, carried his wisdom forward into their own impossible moments. And in the Romanian sanctuary, on a ridge overlooking a valley where dragons flew free and safe, a statue was erected. Not of Charlie alone, but of Charlie and Norberta together. Handler and dragon, human and creature, locked in an embrace that transcended species, that spoke of love and trust and sacrifice. Beneath it, an inscription in both English and Romanian. In memory of all who chose the many over the one, the world over the self, the right path over the easy one. May we honor their sacrifice by protecting what they loved. And perhaps, dear listener, if you were to visit that sanctuary on a quiet evening, when the stars were bright and the wind was soft, you might feel it too, that warmth, that presence, that sense of something magnificent and eternal watching over the valley. The spirit of a dragon who trusted and a handler who loved, united forever in purpose and peace. Now, dear listener, as our story ends, let yourself drift into sleep as gently as snow falling on mountain peaks. Let the tale of Charlie Weasley settle into your heart. A reminder that some choices break us, but also make us. That love sometimes means letting go. That heroism wears many faces, and that a life lived in service of something greater than ourselves is a life well lived. Sleep peacefully, knowing that in the magical world, and in our own, there are those who stand watch, who protect the vulnerable, who make impossible choices with grace and courage. Sleep knowing that sacrifice, though painful, can echo through time, saving lives, changing the world, building legacies that outlive us all. Rest now as Charlie rests at last, his work done, his legacy secure, his dragons flying free under starlight, his peace, finally, beautifully earned. And may you, dear listener, find such peace in your own dreams tonight. Sweet rest, gentle dreams, until the next story calls us together. Good night.